Evening, everybody. It's 6:30. Welcome to the Development Control Committee meeting. We shall now start the meeting. First things first, brief sort of fire safe evacuation health and safety announcement. Fire evacuation procedures for this evening's meeting. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building as soon as you can via the nearest available emergency exit, which is situated behind you in the public gallery and either side behind us at the high table. Exit through reception, and the muster point is in the War Memorial Park. Hopefully we won't have a fire alarm. Tonight's meeting is webcast live on the internet and will be made available on YouTube after the meeting. Mobile phones, please ensure your mobile phones are either switched off or set to silent. That's it in terms of the housekeeping. For the benefit of members of the public watching or participating in the meeting, I'd like to introduce ourselves and explain who everyone is. I am Councillor Andrew McCormick. I'm the chair of this committee. Seated to my right in the far end is Councillor Mike Howard-Sorrell, who is the vice chair of the committee. To my right and in front of me are councillors who will be making decisions on the applications of this evening's agenda. To my immediate right is our legal officer that makes sure that the decisions, while they might be unpopular, will at least be legal. And to my left we've got planning officers who have expertise to lend in the applications to make sure we make a maximally informed decision. The Development Control Committee is a regulatory committee and not a political meeting. The committee will be considering the published papers, listening to contributions brought before us tonight, and will make decisions based on planning law, planning reasons only. We are guided by our local policies, local planning policy and national planning policy guidance. At the appropriate time, I will invite any speakers to contribute to the meeting in the order set out in the update paper. May I ask all speakers, including visiting councillors, to speak clearly and to keep points made to the application on material reasons only. No further dialogue between members of the committee and speakers will be permitted once any questioning has finished. All speakers will be reminded of their permitted speaking time and will be advised when they have 1 minute remaining. Any questions raised by committee members will be on matters of fact. Once all questions are done, there'll be a final round of questions of officers. There may not be questions if the members of the committee have asked them in advance, which they often do. Following all questions, members of the committee will debate each item before coming to a final decision on planning grounds. And in the spirit of the Radio 4 programme, may I ask all committee members to avoid repetition, deviation and hesitation. Committee members will have read the agenda reports and likely to have raised any factual questions ahead of the meeting. This evening there were 5 items on the agenda. We had 1 withdrawn. I would like to think we get the meeting business concluded within 2 hours, but it's very hard to predict these things. I understand that planning can be emotive and ask that everyone remains polite and professional throughout this meeting. So, my preamble at a close, we shall open for business with apologies for absence and substitutions. So, Councillor Bounds, you're substituting Councillor Miller. Councillor Bowes, you're substituting for Councillor Hussey. Do we have any more apologies or substitutions? I think we're done. Good. Declarations of interest. There are none. Urgent matters. There are none. Which brings us on to agenda item 4, minutes of the meeting held 12th of June. Questions for accuracy, those who are present. There are none. Do I have a mover? Councillor Court, and seconder Councillor Howard-Sorrell. Okay, we'll show of hands, those in favour of accuracy, please show. Excellent. Right, I shall now sign these as a true record. And pass them on at the end of the meeting. Okay, now main business applications for planning permission. And we will start with planning item number 1, which is land at Brimpton Road, Borghurst. And if we could have the officer introduced, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 1 seeks planning permission for the erection of 2 dwellings with associated parking on land at Brimpton Road, Borghurst. The application was previously heard at Development Control Committee in June 2023. At that committee, it was resolved to delegate the application back to the planning manager to require the submission of a satisfactory flood risk assessment and reptile translocation information, and upon receipt of that acceptable information to grant planning permission. However, since then, there has been a change in planning policy since. The previous resolution had regard to the tilted balance required as a result of the lack of 5-year housing land supply at the time. Due to the current housing land supply position, this is not required. So due to this change in planning policy, the application has come back to the Development Control Committee with a recommendation for refusal. By way of update, the application has been re-advertised as affecting the setting of a listed building. It's just been picked up that was missed previously. The correct site notice and advertisement in the Basingstoke Gazette have now gone out. As such, the recommendation is to be amended to allow for that consultation period to expire and no new material considerations being raised. There is also a further verbal update. Reason for refusal 1 on page 47 of your main agenda includes reference to distance to services and facilities. This should not have been included. The reason for refusal should solely relate to the principle of the development not being supported by the local plan. So the words distance from facilities and services are to be deleted from that reason for refusal. Otherwise, it stays the same. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I have no parish councillors down to speak, nobody down in support to speak, but I do have Mr. Scott Malden as an objector. Mr. Scott Malden, if you'd like to come up now and please take your seat at one of the benches on the first row to your right. Yes, that's fine. There's 2 buttons on the mic. If you press the right-hand button, and when you're ready, you'll have 4 minutes. Thank you very much.
Okay. Right, we look okay. I haven't addressed a planning committee before, so please forgive me if I get something wrong, but I will do my best anyway. If I could introduce myself, my name's Colin Scott Malden, and my wife and I live in London House, which is the house immediately adjacent to the property. We face the northeast and southeast borders of the property. Now, I'm sure you've read this. I say screed. It's grounds for refusal. I don't really wish to go through that again. It's obviously a long document. I may make a couple of comments on it. If I can just mention a few numbers. First number is 190. That is the number of weeks that this application has been in the system. 190. It's rather a long time. It came before committee last year. That was at the behest of ex-Councillor Rattigan. His reason for doing so was, and I quote, "I feel there are grounds to feel the reasons for refusal are subjective." Well, if you look at this proposal, and it's very similar to the one from last year, there's nothing subjective about it at all. It is, and I can only assume that ex-Councillor Rattigan wasn't sure what subjective means. It's a list of reasons. Your proposal, your reasons for refusal are all based on your policies. These are your policies. And there's a whole load of them there. So as I say, I don't really wish to go through. I would just like to say that the planning department has been excellent in dealing with me. Ruth Treebsch, who is the planning officer, and Mike Townsend, who I think is just there, have been very professional in dealing with my numerous emails. And I think to say that they're a bit subjective is a little bit naughty, I think, about the planning people. Anyway, if I could go on from this, the reasons for refusal, settlement boundary, AWE exclusion zone, but other things which are mentioned here are the boundaries for the our environmental impact. Now, I measured this site this morning on my laser display thing. It's 37 metres wide. Therefore, it's impossible to have the boundary of 20 metres because it simply isn't wide enough. And that's if the trees are... Sorry?
Just go 1 minute, Rainey.
Yep. And that's if the trees are actually correctly plotted, which they're not. If you care, for this bit, you actually need access to a tech-savvy teenager. But if you go to the tree report, 35 pages, you can print out perfectly. Page 36, that's the map. That's inhibited for reasons, for strange reasons. Anyway, if you get a tech-savvy teenager, he'll print it out for you. You will see that there are 65 trees plotted, but 1 or 2 are missing. The major one of which is a large oak tree. And if you plot that in the correct position, it will come, well, to paraphrase the Beatles, it will come in through the bathroom window. It's very large, it's difficult to miss. It's 13 metres, 40 feet high, and it is very, very close to the nearest house. And this boundary thing, to quote, I think it was Mike Townsend in the last...
I'm afraid you're out of time.
Sorry?
I'm afraid you're out of time.
Oh,
Can you sum
okay.
up and then we'll open it for questions?
Sorry, do you wish me to sum up or...?
Well, I think we've probably...
Have you got the...
Members have got the gist of it. Members, have you got any questions you'd like to ask Mr. Scott Malden? Not seeing any hands raised. Okay, thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you.
Okay, if you just switch the mic off, that's, yeah, great, thank you very much. Questions for officers? Councillor Bound.
Good evening. Mr. Scott Malden mentioned the AWE in terms of objection. There's nothing in the reasons for refusal that mentioned the AWE. Were they consulted again after the original application back in June 23?
Thank you. No, they were not reconsulted since the previous, since the application was previously brought to Development Control Committee. The application is the same. It's for the same number of units. It's not altered in any way to warrant a new reconsultation with them. And the consultee comments from them previously was that due to the scale of the development and the distance to the AWE boundary, that there were no concerns and no impact on the emergency planning arrangements.
Any more questions, anyone? Councillor Phillimore?
There is, in the report, mention of Great Crested Newts. Have we got proof of the existence?
So the proposals have been accompanied by a reptile translocation strategy. So, and in addition to that, the site has also been subject to assessment under the impact zones for the district level licence. The site has been identified as potentially holding high likely habitats to moderate likeliness of having habitats on the site. So it is considered that a natural England licence would be required to carry out the works due to impact on great crested newts. And I would also like to say that it is set out in the report that officers do not think that a Natural England licence would be granted in this instance, having regard to the derogation tests.
Any further questions for officers? Okay, debate. Do I have anyone wanting to open? Councillor House-Sorrell?
If nobody else wants to go. It's a very robust list of reasons for refusal, really, isn't it? I'm not sure that even the applicant and their agent haven't tried to argue against it by attending this evening, so I think we can just proceed straight to a vote in moving the officer's recommendation, which I'm happy to do.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Durrant. Okay, we'll move to vote. Those in favour, please show. Okay. Those against, so it's unanimous. Okay. Right, if we could have the decision, please.
Thank you. So that application has been refused, subject to the expiry of the new consultation period and with the updates to recommendation reason for refusal number 1. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on now to planning item number 2. Alderbrook House. If we could have the officer introduced, please.
Thank you. So this is an application at Alderbrook House, Union Lane, Kingsclere. Planning permission is sought for the erection of a single dwelling comprising of 3 bedrooms alongside a new access and associated parking and garden. With regards to updates, the members visited the site on the 9th of July as part of the viewing panel. The agent has also since supplied a flood risk assessment and a rebuttal to the officer's report. These have been assessed and it's not considered that the additional information supplied is sufficient to address the reasons for refusal. And the application is recommended for refusal as set out within the officer's report.
Thank you very much. We don't have any parish representatives, but we do have speaking in support, Caroline Downey and Gina Goldsborough. Welcome to Development Control. If you'd like to take your seats to the right there. And when you're ready, press the right-hand button and you will have 4 minutes between you. Thank you very much.
Chairman, councillors, thank you for your time this evening and very much thank you for your time yesterday as well. The main issues for debate this evening are as follows: whether the site complies with local plan policy SS6A in terms of isolation and land classification, and flooding or flood potential, which we believe are the main reasons for refusal. The main test under local plan policy SS6 is whether the land is previously developed or not. In our opinion, the site here before you is the garden land of Alderbrook House and therefore is PDL. We disagree with the officers that the land is classified as agricultural land. The information to support this was uploaded onto the application last week, which clearly shows through Google Earth imaging that the site is garden land and has been for over 25 years. The area in debate was for a period demarcated for chickens and pets, but evidently the planting of garden trees, such as fruit trees you saw yesterday, can be seen as far back as 1999. The land has been known and maintained as garden land, and so we argue that the land is previously developed. The second test of SS6A is whether the site is isolated or not. The site is under 500 metres via adjacent footpath into Kingsclere, whilst the nearby bus stop outside Kingsclere Park is just over 650 metres away when taking the road. Kingsclere itself has a primary school, public houses and shops, and therefore we do not believe the site is isolated in policy terms. The land is not of high environmental value, and the scale of development is appropriate to the site's context, and so the scheme complies with the full test for local plan policy SS6A. The question of surface water is therefore the only outstanding matter. This has been evidenced in the submitted assessment, which highlights that the area in question is some distance from the site. It's approximately 180 metres away. The area is on the road between Kingsclere and Plastow Green, on a bend in the road that is lower than the field above it, and floods at times when drains, culverts and ditches, which are not maintained, are overcome with rainwater. The road leading up to Alderbrook and Nutkins Farm is not affected. At the site meeting, there were a couple of questions about waste and drainage. These will be dealt with at buildings reg stage, but a new package treatment plant will be installed and the dwelling will be supported by a sustainable drainage system, including rainwater harvesting amongst other initiatives, to enable the site and the building to be thermally efficient and as green as possible. Critically, there are no council consultee objections. Simply, no landscape objection, no biodiversity objection, no highways objection, no historic and environment objection, and no tree officer objection. There are no public objections to the application. In fact, the only consultee who did object was the parish, on the basis that the site was not in a settlement boundary. The site is an exception site and complies with local plan policy SS6, and therefore the reasons for approval should be as follows. The site complies with local plan policy SS6A. There is no impact on EM1 and EM10, as indicated by the acceptance of the landscape team, and the site is in flood zone 1 and therefore complies with local plan policy EM7. In short, the scheme complies, in our opinion, with a long list of acceptable policies, and we therefore urge you to overturn the officer's recommendation and approve the application. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Councillors, do you have any questions? I see no hands raised. Thank you both very much indeed. Questions for officers? I see no hands raised. Oh, Councillor Howard-Sorrell.
Previously developed land, it did look like a garden to me when we went and saw it. Can you comment on that?
So yeah, the discussion on previously developed land is obviously set out in 8.11 of our report in front of us. I think the planning officer reviewed obviously the planning history for the site, which clearly showed the red line associated with the dwelling house adjacent to it being much tighter around. And so the land in question, the application site, wasn't designated as garden land within that planning permission. And on the basis of the area photography, the officer came to the conclusion that it should still remain as agricultural land. And that is our position. We have no evidence further to suggest otherwise.
No further questions, so I shall open it up for debate. Do we have anyone? Councillor Bound and Councillor Phillimore.
Well, I'll start off, Chair. I'm a bit hesitant about the reason for refusal on flooding. My experience of that area is that it certainly floods up on the main road, and it floods very, very, very badly. But I've never known it flood this far down and going down the track towards the site. However, I noticed that the applicant's agent talked about the isolation and not agreeing with that. Well, I have to totally disagree with her. I can't see that anybody who would be living in that residence will be using the footpaths in any way in the winter time, and certainly at any other time to use the lanes that we noticed on our site visit at any time is hazardous, to say the least. And the distance into Kingsclere might be only 600 yards, as it was mentioned. I don't believe that 600 yards is a safe walk for anybody. So I do believe that this is an isolated building, or would be an isolated building in the countryside.
Thank you. Councillor Phillimore.
Sorry to disagree with Councillor Bound. And the definition of isolated, I struggle with the definition of isolated when it's adjacent to an existing building. That's my only problem.
Noted. Anyone else wish to contribute? Okay, do we have anyone prepared to move anything? Councillor Bound. Are you moving the recommendation?
Sorry, I thought I've raised my, yes, sorry, I would move the officer recommendation, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone wish to second? Councillor Bowes. Okay, we have a motion on the table. No one else wishing to speak. We shall move to vote. Those in favour of the recommendation, please show. I think that's near unanimous. Those against, please show. 1. Any abstentions? None. Okay. If we could have the decision, please.
Thank you. So the application has been refused as per the reasons for refusal set out in the report.
Thank you very much. Planning item number 3 tonight has been withdrawn. So we shall move on to planning item number 4, which is Sungrove Farm, East End, Evinger. And I have 4 sets of speakers down to speak tonight. The first one I'd like to call forward is on behalf of the Parish Town Council, Councillor Rose Donoghue. Oh, pardon. We've got to have the introduction first. I was forgetting myself. Right. Yeah, Luke, if you'd like to introduce.
Yeah, thank you. So this is an application at Sungrove Farm, Abbey Wells in East End. Permission has been sought to vary the planning conditions 18 and 31 relating to the opening hours at the permitted mixed-use building comprising of a farm shop, bakery, gift shop, plant nursery, cafe/restaurant and lecture/educational space. The variation of the conditions would result in increasing of the opening hours for the internal space and the external terrace. The applied for hours are set out in the officer's report within the table in the proposal section. With regard to updates, the committee viewing panel visited the site on the 9th of July. A further public representation was also received. However, this did not raise any new material planning considerations which have not already been considered. There is also a verbal update with regards to condition 25, and this is just to amend the wording where there was a typographical error. This should read that no deliveries should occur before 7 or after 7, Monday to Saturdays, and no deliveries on Sunday.
Thank you very much for that.
Sorry, and the application is recommended for permission as set out in the officer's report.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Right, sorry, Councillor Donoghue. When you're ready, press the button right and you'll have 4 minutes. Thank you very much.
This is a fundamental change to the original application within 12 months of opening. Remember, the original application was granted with a condition on opening hours to protect the amenity of nearby residents, and nothing has changed. In 2019, Emily von Opel stated ambitions in respect to this venture were socially rather than commercially driven. She is going back on a basic promise to her neighbours in respect to a small farm shop serving teas and pizzas until 7 p.m. latest. There is much talk about how she cares about her neighbours, yet she seems to buy in the advice of the best advice in the country to ensure she gets her own way. Cocooned behind high brick walls or away at her London or Swiss addresses, she's not here to experience the disruption. Sure, there are some supporters, but if you check their addresses, most are not local, many are friends of the applicant. Importantly, they have absolutely no idea of the disruption being caused to those who are directly linked to the site or its approach roads. There is no doubt it's a nice place to visit. You have seen it for yourselves. It's a quality venue, and you may ask, what's the fuss? Your site visit was on Tuesday, when to date the venue has been closed. You wouldn't have experienced the noise in all its different forms imposed upon the local tranquility. The planning report before you ticks all the boxes, but no doubt, no thought has been given to the underlying business case. It is a nonsense to say that this is for people to linger over coffee. A return on investment will not be recouped by selling a few pizzas. This is about creating a destination, upmarket restaurant attractive to a wider catchment, with more than one sitting, bringing more people, cars, service lorries, noise and disruption. Before you make your decision, there are some facts that I'd like you to consider. There are 5 in total. Number 1, the planning report references an estate agent backing onto the site. That was closed some 7 years ago and is now a family home subjected to significant noise nuisance from the Morley site. The noise impact report was commissioned in November. It is misleading because visitors' numbers would have been down, the terrace would not be used, and maybe more importantly, the report ran from Friday to Tuesday, but business is not currently open on a Monday or Tuesday. My point number 3 is promoted via social media and local advertising. There is now a pizza takeaway offering with more cars and mopeds picking up. There is also pop-up shops in the lecture rooms. My point 4, most visitors come by car. Walkers around the lanes confirm that they are constantly asked for directions. And my final point is the suggestion of staff trained up and undertaking noise control is laudable at one level, but useless to us tonight. Nobody can police or guarantee it will be adhered to, and it does not deal with the car noise. This is a long way from a local shop, farm shop, that was originally given planning permission, but with controlled hours for a good reason. Following your decision today, it is possible that there will be a subsequent licensing application.
1 minute left.
Which one of the considerations is about prevention of public nuisance, which includes noise nuisance. The decision for you today is about balance, the balance of that noise nuisance, the protection of the amenity of the local population while minimising the impacts of the business on local residents. To allow the extended hours is shifting the balance unacceptably against the amenity of local residents, which is in the view of your colleagues, which is the view your colleagues took the last time. Using the neighbourhood plan and local plan to refuse the application on the grounds that the seismic additional noise nuisance created by the extra vehicle and people movement in a quiet hamlet is unacceptable intrusion on the local environment. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much for your contribution. Councillors, do you have any questions for Councillor Donoghue? I see no hands raised. Thank you very much indeed. So speaking in objection, I have Mr. Brunsden, if you'd like to approach. Welcome to Development Control. Push the button on the right, and when you're ready, you'll have 4 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Peter Brunsden. My family and I live in a house adjoining the application site, and tonight I speak for the local neighbours who are directly affected by this application. We have heard in the past how much the applicant cares about her neighbours. We very much doubt that, I'm afraid. The Sunday Times recently listed Emily and Georg von Opel as the 81st richest people in the UK. Well, good for them. This is a bit of a David versus Goliath in terms of they can employ the best advisors in the country to get their own way at the expense of the locals. And we saw this last year with the licensing application where they used a top 5 KC as it was then, to steamroller that application through. Now, despite 200 letters of objection to the original application and the opposition of the AOMB, who described the development as a great idea in the wrong place, consent for the original farm shop was granted. We accept that they have this permission. We are not NIMBYs, but now the farm shop is morphing into a fine dining destination. Please look and consider the opening hours of other farm shops, such as at Heckfield, Englefield and Hungerford. They all close at 5 p.m. or thereabouts. They have substantial cafe restaurants within their demise, and it's not 10:30, which underlines this transition which is happening before our eyes. The latest update on the Malverley's website confirms that the farm shop will be closed for 2 weeks in August for maintenance work in the kitchen and bakery. Now, is that maintenance, or is that to expand the seating area for more diners? That's what we ask. Of course, some locals do use the farm shop, but when I'm cutting the grass on the War Memorial on a Saturday morning, I see dozens of large cars and SUVs piling into the site, not locals, as they often ask me for directions once I've gone around the War Memorial 3 times, perhaps. Although your officers, from a desktop review, say that no harm will come from this application to extend the hours, I'm afraid we beg to differ. No consideration has been given to our real lived experience. Please, I would ask you to consider the young family who live in Dormer Cottage, the Grade 2 listed building adjoining the site, which shares the boundary with Malverley's. They used to be able to sit in their garden on a weekend afternoon and enjoy peace and quiet. Now they hear the noise of cars up and down the driveway, doors banging, voices, laughter, music from the patio. Think of the elderly lady who's just spent £6,000 on triple glazing the front of her listed property to reduce the noise and fumes from delivery trucks waiting outside the site before it opens in the morning. Any increase in traffic, which there will be, is going to go right past her ground floor bedroom window. Please think of the other neighbours who share a boundary with the site and who, like us, can't sit in their gardens on a Sunday afternoon without being overwhelmed by cooking smells and smoke. Is that 1 minute? Sorry. And think of the many other people along that boundary. So this is your chance, please, to stand up for the humble residents. Please refuse the extended hours because of the additional unacceptable imposition it will cause on local residents. The neighbourhood plan, which we all worked on, will support this. And in conclusion, please, should you still be minded to approve the application, could we please crave your indulgence to at least limit the Sunday opening hours to 4 p.m, not 7 p.m, so that we can grab an hour or two of peace and quiet in our own gardens. Please defend the status quo, which we're happy with. We will accept. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Councillors, do we have any questions for Mr. Brunsdon? I see no hands raised. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
And speaking in support, I have Katie Turvey, Matthew Wildman and Stephanie Geeling, if you'd like to approach. Welcome to Development Control. When you're ready, you'll have 4 minutes between the three of you. Thank you.
Thank you, members. As you've heard, this application is solely concerned with the extension of opening hours at Mulvey's Farm and Dining, which opened its doors in May last year. In line with the planning permission granted in 2021, the building contains a small restaurant where people can enjoy a meal using produce from the market gardens grown on the farm, as well as local suppliers, a deli and farm shop where people can buy produce from the market gardens and the on-site bakery, as well as enjoy a coffee and a cake with friends, and a gift shop and a small education space on the first floor. Mulvey's Farm and Dining serves a local community of both East End and the surrounding villages. It of course also welcomes customers from further afield, but the focus is and will continue to be on being local and low-key. New rural jobs have been created and other local rural businesses supported. Mulvey's Farm and Dining is a rural business that policies in the local plan and new neighbourhood plan support. The building has been operating in accordance with its approved planning hours, closing at 7 p.m. in the week, 9 p.m. on Fridays and Saturdays, and 4 p.m. on Sundays, albeit, as you've heard, the building is closed on Mondays and Tuesdays. The external terrace has been operating no later than 7 p.m. So it is already operating into the evenings, and it is important to note that the hours that were sought by the applicant themselves at the outset are the hours in the condition and not hours that were stipulated by officers or environmental health at the time. However, Mulvey's is increasingly being asked by regular customers for later bookings and to be able to stay in the restaurant longer to avoid rushing their meals. Extended hours are being sought to facilitate this. Concerns raised by neighbours have been listened to and the hours sought reduced. Our client is now just asking for an additional 1.5 hours until 10:30 p.m. on Fridays and Saturdays, an additional 3 hours until 10 p.m. on Wednesdays and Thursdays, and an additional hour on Sundays until 5 p.m. For the external terrace, we are just seeking an additional hour until 8 p.m. Wednesday to Saturday, and it will be closed at 5 p.m. on Sundays. As you have heard, we've submitted a noise report with the application. This includes detailed worst-case scenario testing and cumulative impact testing, including double counting, to demonstrate that the extended hours will not result in any harmful noise impacts on the closest residential neighbours. Assessments that are carried out at the quietest times are the more robust of assessments. We are pleased that the Council's Environmental Health team agree with the findings. The Highway Authority are also satisfied that there would be no material impact in terms of traffic generation and highway safety. We of course recognise that the nature of the site and the level of activity associated with the site has changed. Mulvey's have always strived to be respectful to neighbours. It is noteworthy that there have never been any complaints directly to Mulvey's or the Council. Concerns raised by neighbours during the course of the application process have been listened to. We haven't just reduced the hours being sought, but we have also prepared a noise management plan and relocated the bins to behind the barns so that they are as far away from neighbours as possible.
1 minute left.
I can confirm there will be no change to refuse collection with the extended hours. We note comments made about impact on the dark skies within the AONB, but the building already operates in the evenings and after dark, and the lighting is in accordance with that previously approved, which is sensitive to its rural location. The building won't be open any later than any of the pubs and restaurants dotted around this part of the AONB. Just to clarify on a couple of points, the noise survey was undertaken over 5 days, not just Mondays and Tuesdays, it was Fridays through to the Tuesday. And music isn't played on the terrace. Thank you and welcome any questions. We have our noise consultant here if there are any noise questions, and somebody representing Mulverley's Farm and Dining if there are any operational questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got a number of hands here. I think Councillor Bound first, and then Councillor Bound.
I've got two, but I'll go with mine first. So you say categorically that the terrace doesn't have music played. So why do neighbours come to us and say that there is? What's that about, do you think?
We don't have any speakers outside in terms of playing music. Perhaps it's people sitting on the terrace and chatting. But also, just to clarify, the terrace is on the side away from our closest neighbours on the boundary. So the only response I could have is that there's people perhaps sitting and chatting, but we definitely don't play any music and we don't have any speakers out there.
Okay, yep, you get another bite of the cherry.
But my second one was, you sat in here as we have and Mr. Brunston's asked us to consider a request about Sundays and closing at 4. I just wonder what your view is about that.
Yeah, I mean, originally we had actually kind of wanted to go a little bit later to 7 o'clock, but when we had responses from the objectors, we really took them into consideration and thought we will reduce to 5 p.m. Just because, you know, the people have a quieter day on a Sunday and people are kind of getting ready for school, so that's something that we took on board and reduced kind of in line with what the objectors were saying.
Thank you. Can you switch the mic off?
Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor Bound.
Thank you. I don't know whether you heard one of the objections, but mentioned vehicles delivering to the site, keeping their engines running at some time before they deliver early in the morning. Are there any restrictions on the delivery time? And in your opinion, do they actually leave their engines running?
So, from an operational perspective, we have deliveries between the hours of 7 a.m. and 7 in the evening. In terms of people keeping their engines on, they usually kind of park up in the delivery bay and we'll help them unload. And then I don't think people keep their engines running, no. The only people that I would say are kind of really quickly in and out would be the refuse, and they collect weekly to collect the bins.
Just to add, the hours for deliveries are in line with the planning conditions, so there is a restriction on them. And if can you not hear me? Sorry, can you hear me now? Yeah, there's a planning condition with those hours so it is restricted on the planning permission, and the deliveries are in line with those restrictions. And I'm sure if ever that can be fed back, if it is ever found that a lorry is doing that, I'm sure the operators can tell them to make sure they turn their engines off if that is ever found to be the case.
Councillor Court.
Hey, Jack. We've had a number of discussions and some evidence provided, but at the moment I don't see that we've seen any evidence you've actually had any formal consultation with the surrounding neighbours. Is there any paperwork? Is there anything? Because at the moment we've heard, for instance, just take Sunday, preference would be 4 p.m. and you've got 5 p.m. and you say you've agreed to take it back from 7. But I'm not sure, certainly from what I'm seeing, that there's actually been any sort of formal consultation with the surrounding neighbours.
So we had actually a private consultation with our neighbours from Dormer Cottage regarding those specific hours, and it was kind of a direct communication with them on reducing them after they'd seen the original application.
Letters were also posted to both immediate neighbours about the application and inviting meetings or discussions to talk about the application.
Okay, anyone who's not already asked a question, have a question? Councillor Jones?
Okay, yeah, it was really just clarification. Where these lorries are waiting, I thought I heard in the objection that they weren't necessarily within the site. No, they're not. And also, when we say the engine was running, is it actually the refrigeration units that are running rather than the engines?
That's the engine.
It is the engines.
Excuse me, we can't have people from the chamber speaking over because councillors are having difficulty hearing what the people lined up to speak are saying. Sorry, pray continue.
Yeah, it was really just the location that they're waiting in, and B, despite is it the engines or a refrigeration unit that's running, or is it to drive some refrigeration that the engines are running?
I think, honestly, I'd need further kind of clarification from the objectors of where they think the engines are running. I mean, in terms of deliveries coming in, there couldn't be anybody out on the street. It would be too far to kind of walk up the drive to keep their engines on and deliver. But then in terms of any air conditioning units, that's all been acoustically screened and is in line with the original planning application.
Just to confirm, delivery times and deliveries won't change as a result of the extended hours.
Do you want to redirect? Have you got any?
It was just to clarify, really, from our visit to the site. Yeah. I couldn't quite see why the vehicles were so close that their fumes would be disturbing people. That was what was rather puzzling me.
Yeah, I don't know if I understand.
I mean, I assume most lorries come onto the site.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if, you know, this is, as I say, nothing's changing in terms of deliveries in respect of the application and the extended opening hours, but this sort of information can be fed back and we can ensure that lorries do come into the site and move further into the site to avoid that happening.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any councillors who have not asked two questions who might have a question? Okay, I'll move it on to debate then. Councillor Carr, I'll have you down to speak as well. Thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, forgot. Right, welcome to DC. I'm sure you know the drill. When you're ready, you've got 4 minutes.
In 2021, this committee voted to approve the development of Sungrove Farm, going against the majority of residents. I trust in the wisdom of your judgment. And in doing so, the committee made a finely balanced planning judgment, placing business gain ahead of noise and nuisance impacts to neighbours and the burdens of traffic on a small set of winding country lanes. What made it possible for you to diverge from community opinion were the limitations and controls on opening hours, which helped mitigate some of the amenity impacts on residents. I'm afraid what has happened since is an exercise in a billionaire salami slicing piece, I'm afraid, where the applicant has sought to achieve their preferred outcome step by small step, first at licensing and now at development control. I ask you to stand by your planning judgment of 2021 and respect the compromise position that respected the amenity of local neighbours in accordance with policy EM10. This application falls foul of our licensing objectives, which aim to prevent public nuisance. Members have to understand this would see the restaurant open until 10, 11 at night, bringing the noise of cars and customers, disturbing an otherwise dark and silent night. By depriving residents of the chance of a peaceful evening, the application creates additional unreasonable harm that breaches our licensing objectives and planning policy. In paragraphs 174, 185 and 187 of the NPPF specifically ask us to protect areas of tranquility that remain undisturbed by noise and are prized for their amenity value. I don't think we've been persuaded by the business case tonight, but the extent of local impact has been considerable. East Woodies Neighbourhood Plan, Policy LB1, confirms that all commercial development proposals should be of a scale that respects local community in terms of traffic, noise, vibration and disturbance. Your 2021 judgment respected that scale. This application does not. I'm thinking of the score of local residents who've expressed concern about traffic, noise and disturbance at this site. Many residents are afraid to comment publicly. East End is a small place, but residents are clear that the situation should not get worse. I'm thinking of the residents who can no longer sit in their gardens in peace without the constant noise of cars and banging and music, though that seems to be a contested point. Of the resident who had to spend £6,000 on new glazing just to protect her property from noise from external fumes and delivery lorries and the noise from the external terrace, which we have to remember, the application would open that terrace much later into the evening. There were controls on opening hours for a reason. It was to protect the population of East End. It was to achieve a reasonable balance. So I ask you to hold fast to your original planning judgments, to the compromise that balanced business gain with residential amenity by placing restrictions to 5 to 7 p.m. You permitted a small farm shop restaurant, not a very busy restaurant, operating late into the evening. Nothing has changed since the original application to justify this, except a desire to increase profit. Please don't accept a scheme that will harm and disrupt the residential amenity of a really precious jewel of a community, bringing more people and more traffic into an otherwise dark, peaceful and silent night. Thank you.
Okay, questions for Councillor Carr? Councillor Bound. There is a convention that we normally only ask 2 questions, but given that you're new to this committee, I shall indulge you a third on this item.
Hopefully I'm not asking for too much indulgence, because I just wondered what Councillor Carr's view was on the 3 points that we've discussed about Sunday at 4 p.m, deliveries, where the music's coming from and why so much music.
Referring to the beginning of the meeting, I said questions of fact only. Do you have a question of facts to ask Councillor Carr?
Yeah, there's something about, factually, we've heard a request about 4 p.m. What's his view about that? We haven't heard that until tonight.
If you're asking someone's view, I'm advised it's not a question of fact.
Councillor Carr has had his 4 minutes to make his views known to the committee, so you can ask questions of fact to pick up factual points only.
Councillor Howard-Sewell.
Thank you, Chair. You referred to some paragraphs within the NPPF in your speech. Could you give me those numbers? Because I looked at the numbers I think you said, and they don't seem to line up with the content that you mentioned.
Thank you, Councillor. I was advised by a colleague who gave me some advice on this that it was 174, 185 and 187. I am willing to be corrected if you can see a difference there. But the advice that was given to me is that the NPPF makes very clear the points about protecting tranquility in areas that remain undisturbed by noise. And I think we should hold to that point.
Councillor Fillmore.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Carr. You are aware, of course, that licensing objectives have nothing to do with planning applications.
Of course. I'm very aware of that. I just think it's very important that the committee is aware of the context of the situation. The arguments that you think are material are your own.
Any further questions? I don't see any hands raised. Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Carr. Any questions for officers? Councillor Gaskell.
Thank you, Chair. Just a point of clarification. Are we allowed to consider hours in planning?
Thank you. Yes, the purpose of the application is to vary the current hours of the opening hours of the site. That is what we're discussing. So, yes.
Yeah, do you want to redirect?
So you can confirm that's not a licensing, it's a planning issue, is it?
Yes, so this committee is related to planning only. So we're looking at the planning applications and the planning merits of the scheme in front of us, and not the licensing. That is dealt separately under separate legislation.
Any other questions, anybody? I see no hands raised. Right, okay, then in which case we shall open it up for debate. Who would like to speak first? Councillor Bound.
Thank you, Chair. Well, we had a site visit on yesterday. Yeah, I was going to say Friday, but yesterday. It was quite illuminating. I mean, you couldn't really tell from the map the situation of the build. And it certainly took us on some quite narrow roads. I would agree with the objectors on that. However, I'm sure people live in that village and use those roads all the time with big vehicles. So I'm not worried about the extra traffic that they talk about that might possibly be involved with the extra opening hours. On the other hand, the applicant says that they're not looking at extra traffic. All they're looking at is allowing the diners to have a more comfortable time, I suppose, in not having to rush their food. I mean, on the site visit, we saw quite clearly that the terraced areas were away from the main areas of habitation. We saw where the bins were miles away from where they were going to cause any disturbance with glass being placed into them. We've all been told by the applicant that there are no outside speakers. I think a lot of the objections from the objectors, I don't really see are real. I will wait to see what other people have got to say in terms of this application, but I personally have got no problem with it.
Thank you. Councillor Durrant.
Thank you, Chair. I sort of see this as a sort of usage creep, really, from a daytime venue creeping into the evenings, and without doubt, in a quietish, secluded area, the noises of comings and goings for extra hours in the day into the what I would call nighttime, 11 o'clock, 10 o'clock. I do think that is intrusive, and I do think that will have an adverse impact on the area.
Are you moving refusal? Okay. Councillor House.
Thank you, Chair. Surprisingly, I was actually quite convinced by Councillor Carr. I was fully in the same mindset as Councillor Bound until he spoke, and then I actually do think that had this application come before us with these hours originally, we might have had pause to maybe rethink whether we approved it or not. And as Councillor Durrant has said, I think at this point changing the hours is almost the equivalent of a PIP, which we all very much dislike. It's an initial application and then changing it at a later date to try and skirt what might have been a refusal if it had come forward with these hours. So I'm again not entirely sure if I want to remove refusal, but I have identified some paragraphs in the MPPF which I think probably you just got the numbers wrong that could potentially be used. So I'll see what anybody else thinks.
Okay, well, anyone moving refusal will need to have reasons for refusal if it's contrary to something in the National Planning Policy Framework or one of our local policies or local neighbourhood plan where extant, then that's fine, but we do need to have material reasons for refusal. Does anybody else wish to contribute to debate at this point? We do not have any motions on the table, but we have had a couple of members speak against the application. If anyone else who wishes to speak? Stunned silence at this point. Any of the people who have spoken objection wish to move refuse? Oh, Councillor Bound. Okay, so we have a mover for the recommendation. Do we have a seconder for the recommendation? Councillor Phillimore. Okay, so we have live proposal on the table. Those in favour of the application, please show. Okay. Okay. Those against? Okay, that motion is carried. Can we have the decision, please?
Thank you, Chair. So the application has been approved subject to the conditions set out in the officer's report. And including the additional update to condition 25 with the delivery times.
Okay, duly noted. Which brings us on to planning item number 5, Cobb Cottage, Aldermaston Road, Pamber End. And Gemma, if you could introduce, please.
Thank you. Item 5 seeks advertisement consent for the display of a wooden cat sign on top of an existing fence at the entrance to an existing cattery business operating at Cobb Cottage, Aldermaston Road. It is noted that the location of the proposed sign has been amended since submission in response to comments on the application. And just to reiterate what's in the report, consideration for adverts is limited to matters of amenity and public safety. The application is before the committee tonight due to the number of objections received and the officer's recommendation for approval. There is no update.
Thank you very much. I have Janet Ayres and Tracy Davies to speak in support. Welcome to Development Control. When you're ready, you'll have 4 minutes between you. Press the button on the right of each station. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. We are Janet and Tracy from Charlie's Cattery. We are here today to outline our reasons for our planning application. Our original application was for the sign to be placed on the grass verge outside our property. The sign that we inherited from Carlton Cattery, they had it on their grass verge outside their property in Ashford Hill for many years. Unfortunately, they closed. We inherited the sign and changed all the wording over to our cattery. We received a few opposing comments to our original application from our direct neighbours and the parish council, so we decided to revise our plans to keep all parties happy. We are now requesting permission for the wooden cat sign to be placed within our boundary on top of our fence line to provide better visibility as to where we are. Our customers often comment that they cannot find us until they have driven past, even those customers that have been coming to us for many years. We have a lot of elderly customers and not all of them use Google Maps or SatNav, but the ones that do still need the visibility of where to turn into our driveway. The A340 is a busy road. Not all drivers observe the speed limit. There is also a slight bend in the road when travelling from the Tadley direction, known as Court Corner, and our entrance is just beyond that bend, so our existing sign cannot be seen on the fence panel until you're almost on top of it. The new sign will enable better and earlier visibility for vehicles travelling from both directions. It will also allow more time for our customers to slow down, make a safe approach into our driveway and warn other vehicles of their intentions to do so. We've received no further opposing comments to our revised application. Many of our customers are in support of the sign. Therefore, we would ask you to consider acceptance of our application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillors, do we have any questions? I see shaking heads there, so thank you very much for your contribution. Questions for officers, anyone? There are none. Okay, debate. Do we have anyone wishing to open things, moving or whatever? Okay, Councillor Howard-Sorrell.
Well, the first 4 objections all talk about a sign on the grass verge, so those objectors will be very happy to know that this is an application for the sign to go on top of the fence. To that end, I'm happy to move approval.
Anyone seconding? Councillor Durrant. Okay, have a live proposal on the table. Those in favour, please show. I think that's unanimous. Okay, so that brings us to agenda item 6. Oh, we'll have the decision, sorry.
Just to confirm that that application has been approved in line with the officer's recommendation.
Okay, and now we have agenda item 6, which is the variation of or removal of a section 52 agreement. If we could have that introduced, please.
So the council have received a request to remove a section 52 legal agreement in its entirety, which restricts the occupancy of the property to staff employed at Malthouse Farm only. Officers do not have delegated powers to determine such requests, and therefore the request has been brought to committee tonight. In this instance, the property subject to the request benefits from a lawful development certificate which establishes that the property has been used as an independent dwelling in breach of that restriction. As such, the property can lawfully be occupied independently, and the Section 52 legal agreement is therefore no longer considered necessary. It's recommended that the request be approved. By way of verbal update, committee are advised that a deed of discharge has been drafted. It is just recommended that the recommendation be slightly amended slightly, so for it to change to be for the removal of the Section 52 agreement subject to the completion of that deed of discharge. Thank you. There is no further update.
Okay, and we've got Alexandra Webb here to speak in support. Thank you for your patience. Welcome to Development Control. When you're seated and set up, press the button on the right and you'll have 4 minutes. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you, Chair and members, for this opportunity to speak. I won't take up much of your time, as I feel the officer has provided a full and fair assessment of the proposal in her report and in this presentation before you. I'd just like to also highlight that the granting of the certificate has set the scene for the background and for the requirement of this request. The certificate set out how the property was continuously occupied for more than 20 years and unrestricted for that period, and established the use as an independent dwelling. That's been issued, and therefore there is no requirement to evaluate this against planning policies. Even so, policies have changed since that time, and perhaps if the original application were before you, it may be considered appropriate. That would be a separate process, and just also highlight that there's no planning reason to not agree to this request. Many thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillors, do you have any questions? No? Okay, thank you very much indeed. Any questions for officers? I see no hands raised. Okay, so we shall move on to debate. Anyone wish to contribute? Move? Councillor Howard Sorrell, do I have a seconder? We'll see what you're moving first.
I was going to move. You beat me to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, we have a seconder. Okay, Councillor Court. Okay, those in favour, please show. Okay, I think that's unanimous. Right, if we could have the decision, please.
Thank you. So that is approved subject to the completion of the deed of discharge as referred to in the update.
Excellent, thank you very much. Well, there being no further business, I will close the meeting now. Thank you very much for your attendance and see you next month.